New gut health foods research from Cambridge just identified 105 previously unknown bacterial species living inside you, and what you eat in the next 72 hours will determine whether they help you or harm you. Innova Market Insights has named gut health the #1 global food and beverage trend for 2026. That is not a wellness influencer's opinion. It is an industry forecast backed by consumer purchasing data from over 80 countries. The science behind this trend is moving fast, and most of the internet is already behind. From a landmark February 2026 study to the fermented foods trial that changed how researchers think about microbial diversity, here is exactly what the evidence actually says, and the specific foods that earned their place on the list. Every January, Innova Market Insights surveys thousands of food professionals and consumers worldwide to identify the trends that will reshape grocery aisles. For 2026, their #1 pick was gut health, specifically what they call the Gut Health Hub, a convergence of functional foods, personalized nutrition, and microbiome science. This did not come from nowhere. Global sales of probiotic and prebiotic products crossed $69 billion in 2023, according to Grandview Research, growing at a compound annual rate of 7.5%. But here is what makes 2026 different. The research has finally caught up with the market. We now have clinical data precise enough to connect individual food choices to measurable changes inside the gut within days, not months. The gap between laboratory findings and your kitchen counter has never been smaller. In February 2026, researchers at the University of Cambridge published a study in the journal Cell Host and Microbe that redrew the map of the human gut, using large-scale metagenomic sequencing, essentially reading every strand of microbial DNA in thousands of stool samples. The team identified 105 novel bacterial species that had never been cataloged before. Many belonged to understudied families within the Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes phyla, the two dominant groups in the human intestine. What made this study landmark was the functional analysis. The researchers showed that several of these newly identified species produce short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate, which fuels the cells lining your colon and helps regulate inflammation. In other words, these bacteria are not passive passengers. They are active participants in immune regulation, and their abundance is shaped directly by dietary fiber and fermented food intake. To understand why these discoveries matter, you need to grasp the sheer scale of the ecosystem inside you. A 2016 study by Sender, Fuchs, and Milo at the Weizmann Institute revised the classic estimate: your body harbors roughly 38 trillion bacterial cells, slightly outnumbering your 30 trillion human cells. Your gut alone contains approximately 1,000 distinct species, and their combined genome, your microbiome, encodes about 3.3 million unique genes, roughly 150 times the number in your own DNA. This is not decoration. These microbes collectively weigh about 2 kilograms, heavier than your brain. They produce neurotransmitters like serotonin, synthesize vitamins, including K2, and several B vitamins, and train your immune system from birth. When researchers talk about gut health foods, they are really asking, which foods feed the right members of this 2-kilogram organ? In 2021, Stanford School of Medicine ran a 10-week randomized controlled trial published in Cell that delivered one of the cleanest results in microbiome nutrition research. 36 healthy adults were assigned either a high fermented food diet or a high fiber diet. The fermented food group consumed 6 servings daily of foods like yogurt, kefir, kimchi, kombucha, and sauerkraut. By the end of 10 weeks, the fermented food group showed a statistically significant increase in microbiome diversity, measured across over 200 fecal samples using shotgun metagenomic sequencing. Crucially, they also showed decreases in 19 inflammatory proteins, including interleukin-6, a key marker linked to chronic disease. The high-fiber group did not see the same diversity gains in that time frame, though fiber's benefits operate through different mechanisms we will address shortly. This study reframed fermented foods from folk tradition to clinical intervention. If fermented foods introduce beneficial microbes, fiber is what keeps them alive. Dietary fiber is the primary fuel for bacterial fermentation in the colon, producing short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, propionate, and acetate, that maintain gut barrier integrity and modulate immune function. The American Gut Project, one of the largest citizen science microbiome studies ever conducted, analyzed over 10,000 samples and found that people who ate 30 or more plant types per week had significantly more diverse microbiomes than those eating 10 or fewer, regardless of whether they identified as vegan, vegetarian, or omnivore. Despite this, the average American adult consumes only about 15 grams of fiber daily, half the 28 to 34 grams recommended by the dietary guidelines for Americans. That gap is not trivial. Low fiber intake has been associated with reduced microbial diversity within just 24 hours in controlled feeding studies. So which specific foods have earned their place in the research? First, kefir, a 2019 study in the British Journal of Nutrition, showed that regular kefir consumption increased lactobacillus populations and improved lactose digestion. Second, kimchi. Korean research published in the Journal of Medicinal Food documented its anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties tied to its Lactobacillus plantarum content. Third, oats. Their beta-glucan fiber selectively feeds bifidobacteria, with measurable increases seen in just 2 weeks. Fourth, leeks and garlic. Rich in inulin, a prebiotic fiber that resists digestion until it reaches the colon, where it fuels butyrate-producing bacteria. Fifth, extra virgin olive oil. A 2020 nutrients review found polyphenols in olive oil shift gut composition toward anti-inflammatory species. Notice the pattern. Diversity on your plate drives diversity in your gut. No single superfood replaces a varied, fiber-rich, fermented food-inclusive diet. Knowledge without application is just trivia. Here is a practical framework grounded in everything we have covered. Start with 1 fermented food daily, a small serving of yogurt with live cultures, a forkful of sauerkraut, or a glass of kefir. You do not need 6 servings. The Stanford trial used that dose to generate measurable data in 10 weeks. Any consistent intake beats none. Next, aim for 30 distinct plants per week. That includes fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. Each one counts. A varied stir-fry with 5 different vegetables and 2 spices already puts you at 7. Track your fiber intake for 1 week to establish a baseline. Most people are stunned by how far below 30 grams they actually fall. Bridging that gap is arguably the single highest return dietary change you can make for long-term gut health and whole body resilience.